We can go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to Shop Talk with AVP today, getting to know Aviary. I'm Lisa Johnston. I'm the administrative coordinator for the Council of State Archivists. And we want to just thank you for joining us, a chance to get to know a little bit more about one of our sponsors and the products they carry. So what we're going to do today is we're actually going to have a presentation from AVP. He's actually, Kevin Glick is going to demonstrate the Aviary product, and then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. So without further ado, let's go ahead and I'll turn it over to stop sharing my screen. And Kevin, you can go ahead and take over. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And thanks for sharing your product.
Thank you very much, Lisa. As Lisa said, my name's Kevin Glick. I'm the product manager of the Aviary Online AV Access System. I've been the product manager working at AVP since last October of 2021. And before that, I was an archivist at Manuscripts and Archives at Yale University for the previous 20 years, and had been a user of and client of AVP and Aviary and moved over last year. So today I'm just going to give a bit of an introduction and demonstrate Aviary and talk a bit about how you might use Aviary and state archives or historical societies. And feel free to ask questions. I'm going to have plenty of time for questions. If you just want to provide them in the chat, the moderators will help me out with that, and we can work through those. Okay, so Aviary is an audio and video streaming platform. It's a subscription service designed specifically for libraries, archives, and historical organizations. It was created as a collaboration between the information innovation firm AVP and the Fortunoff Video Archive for Holocaust Testimonies at Yale University. With Aviary, content holders can provide customized, access-controlled publishing of audiovisual collections so that they're searchable and playable, while users can search across and within video and audio collections and their metadata to find and play back specific moments based on those searches. Aviary provides users search, navigation, and playback across organizations through an intuitive interface, while the content owners have this flexibility to publish with their own look and feel and with granular permissions, something that's really important in archives, allowing organizations to decide exactly who can search and access their content in the ways that they want it to be done. At this time, Aviary is still sort of a small product. There are 165 Aviary organizations in a variety of sizes and types, but most commonly we're talking about archives, museums, libraries, or individual historians or interviewer of some sort, largely because of the ability to connect audiovisual content to different types of time-bound metadata and annotations. So what kind of AV content is Aviary made for? Well, Aviary is made for a bunch of different types of content. And the slide here just sort of lists a few different sort of examples. There we have examples of customers that are creating podcasts in Aviary, examples at Fortunoff Video Archive or Queens Public Library are doing podcasts. There are recordings of classes, integration with classes that happens in aviary. There is examples of the documentation of events, and these can be all sorts of events, either public events that are recorded or sporting events, various different kinds of things. Webinars, if you've been to one of these COSA Shop Talks, the Shop Talks are actually stored, those webinars are stored in Aviary itself. So you've probably seen that before. Meetings of various sort. This is one that seems like is one that works well for state archives, in that this could be the place where you're holding records, or not necessarily holding the record copy, but the access copy for the public of public meetings to fulfill some sort of government open record or meeting regulation. Then there's a variety of different sort of marketing materials, archival, audiovisual content. There's a huge mass of oral histories inside Aviary, and then also different kinds of research. So there can be a lot of different kinds of content in Aviary, but Aviary isn't everything. What Aviary isn't an image or a text repository. It's not a place where you put all of your pictures for your digital library or your marked up text content. It's not a single research portal that contains every conceivable type of content. It's really focused on audiovisual materials and I'll show text, markup text, and image and PDF content that is subservient to that audiovisual content. It's not a digital records management application or preservation system. It's more an aside that works and could integrate with those sorts of systems. It's not an AV creation and editing system. It's not the place where you do your recordings and then edit the AV itself. It does have some very limited functionality to help with clip creation and then metadata creation and transcription, but it's not the primary, it's not a production ready AV editing system itself. And it's not really a system to collect fees for AV access. It doesn't have any functionality surrounding that. So it's not really a thing for you to set up for people to subscribe to your AV access and then impose some sort of DRM, digital rights management, on top of. Okay, so not to get too overwhelming about some detail about how the system works, but it does seem like it's good to talk a little bit about the organization of how the content model of Aviary works, just to describe a little bit about what it is and how it fits together. So Aviary is made up of organizations, right? So there are, as I said, there's 165 different organizations that have their own site in Aviary. And that can be, as I said, that could be, Kevin Glick's personal oral histories, or it could be Harvard University Library. There could be a wide range of things in there, but that's what an organization is. Then an organization is made up of primarily of collections. And so collections are groups of resources. Collections could be archival collections, and there are a lot of archives that call collections archives. Collections can be any artificial grouping that one makes. Aviary doesn't care what you call your collection, but an organization has to have at least one collection, if not hundreds of collections, depending upon the size. But then a collection, each collection is made up of one to many resources, and resources are the primary unit in aviary. It is the thing that everything sort of revolves around. It is the intellectual object, but basically, if we were talking about an oral history, we're talking about the interview. If we're talking about some sort of work, it's that intellectual object that may have one to many media files. So it could be for a conference day, say, or an event that has several different recordings that are attached to it. So the resource then is made up of, as I said, one to many media files, and those media files are audio or video files, and those are then linked, and I'll show how that linking works together. Resources then have their own descriptive metadata that at its most basic level is just simple Dublin core metadata, but then allows for a great deal of custom metadata that can describe what the resource is. And it depends on the use case, on what you're trying to do. In many cases, small aviary organizations have very minimal description about each resource. Others have quite in-depth description about a resource, whether that's because they have some bibliographic description inside a catalog or archival description in their archival descriptive system like ArchiveSpace. But that's in that description of a resource where that's usually showing up. Then resources can also have supplemental files that go along with those. I'll get into those a little bit more, but those are images or PDF files that are subservient, helping to describe the resource itself. Think if you have some sort of oral history interview, maybe you have pictures that the person of objects that the interviewee brought along to describe important things in their life. That could be, or maybe you have some sort of edited transcript or brochure describing the resource. If it's an event, maybe it's an advertisement of the event or pictures from the event, something along those lines. That's what the supplemental files are, and they really describe the resource, not the media files specifically of themselves. But then the media files then have a number of different things that can describe them. They can have one-to-many transcripts, the word-for-word text of the spoken words that are happening in the recording, and those transcripts can have annotations. They can have many annotations for each transcript. Transcripts can also be captions used for closed captioning in the player, and then media files can also have one-to-many indexes, which are time-coded summaries or keywords, subjects, or URLs or GPS locations describing small segments of the media themselves. Think more like table of contents of a book or an OHMS segment, which we'll talk a little bit in a moment. So if we go through those different parts and look at them a little bit more, let's go back to that main object, the resource. So this is a picture of what the resource detail screen looks like for an example here, just an example from Yale University. And hopefully I'm gonna demo live here. So let's hope this all works live. Okay. And so this is the sort of view that that a researcher sees when is not a staff logged in here. You can see the login button. So the way that the resource detail page looks like in Aviary is you have some sort of styling that's up to the organization, like this header that Manuscripts and Archives has put up at the top, and some sort of navigation that helps a little bit. But the the main portion of the resource detail starts here below this tan section with a title, descriptive title of the resource itself. Here in this case, it's a recording created in 1970, documenting the coeducation of Yale College. And there's a number of, it was sort of a 4-publication recording that they made at that time, film. Then it shows the collection that this comes from, and then you have your player here that has most of the sorts of player tools that one would be used to in YouTube or Kelter or Vimeo or the like. And there's some customization and how that can work. And it you then see below the media files that are associated with this. In this case, this is a simple resource. There's only one media file, but if there were many, they would be displayed here. And hoverovers allow for titles to be displayed to help distinguish between the different media files, if they're part 1, part 2, part 3, or act 1, act 2, or meeting 1, meeting 2, or whatever they might be in here. It can be popped out, it can be shared, it can be embedded in a different website if that's the case. Over at the right, then you've got this resource description that I was talking about. That could be whatever metadata you feel is most appropriate for that resource. In this case, this is something that was described with archival description and archive space, which they synced directly. And so the sort of archival description categories show up in here. We'll get more into that a little bit later in the presentation. And then there's some tabs in here to show the other types of objects, indexes, transcripts, supplemental files. These tabs here only show to end users if there's actually anything in here for the user to see. So if you don't have a transcript, the transcript tab doesn't display. But so here's an example of a transcript. So we'll go on to the next category here, is transcripts. So transcripts can be either full captions that meet ADA compliance criteria, or they could be edited transcripts. It all depends on the use case for the user, but they're displayed over here at the right, and they are then include the time codes to move the user along with the point in the actual recording over here at the right. And if one moves along, there is an auto scroll function that allows that causes the transcription to move along with the player. I don't want to play this too much and cause too much noise in the background there. These transcripts then are fully searchable. So if we typed in some sort of search term, I didn't put that in quotes, you can see that in the search of that, we've got 4 examples of New Haven that allows one to move through. And then when you find something that you're looking for, then you can just move yourself just to that spot in the recording. You can also see that in that search, I wasn't just searching transcript, but I was searching the resource description itself. And so we can go to that and see that the preferred citation happens to have it in there. And then also it's finding 5 hits in this PDF file here in the supplemental files, which we'll just get into in a few moments. So transcripts can be fully displayed. And there can be multiple versions of transcripts that are stored with any particular resource. So for example, I just threw this one into Google Translate to translate it to Spanish so that one could theoretically have the the chorus singing, showing that that's what's happening at this part in here. And those can be changed by the end user to be displayed. Any transcript that works as a caption can be set as a caption, and then it will then, once turned on, it will then be displayed in the closed captioning section here. I won't play too much, but you can see singing popped up when I turn that on. And if we switch it over to Spanish and we choose the Spanish closed captioning, it's got singing in Spanish that shows up over there. That's regardless of which of the actual transcripts you're setting, the user can have the other language showing up in the closed captioning if they want to see one versus the other. So that's so transcripts. If you've got your own transcripts, they can be imported and added into Aviary. You'd have to be logged in as a organizational admin to get this ability to add a new transcript or to update a transcript. But transcripts can come from plain text files or web VTT marked up files using that standard. We also do integration with third-party services to help with the creation of transcripts. So we integrate with IBM Watson that allows a user to create transcripts, and then we just pass the third-party charges on that directly in and create transcripts. We also integrate directly with Trent, which is another transcription service, and that happens to be what this one is here. I know that because it says Auto Trent. It was made automatically through an integration with that Trent transcription service. And so there's a variety of ways that you could use those and connect those transcriptions. In addition to transcriptions, there's the capability to annotate transcriptions. If one wanted to have more in-depth description of portions of the transcript. And I just have a very simple example here showing how this works once the annotations are actually made in the background by staff. Here's how it can display. There's only one annotation on this transcript, and it's talking about it. The highlight is let's have a long cheer for Yale, and you can see that it's green, and then there's a little pop out that displays below the media player, and it talks about a history of actually what the long cheer is, a specific thing at Yale, and you have the ability to give some extra documentation and perhaps provide links out. And I think there's a link out here to a Yale Daily News article about the long cheer in there, just to do that. That is extra work for an organization to put together, but that is another possibility, is annotations on transcripts. Beyond annotation, beyond transcripts, captions, and annotations, there can be indexes. As I said, indexes are time-coded descriptions of segments of the media, each media file, and that can be created inside Aviary, or it can be imported into Aviary if you have pre-existing indexes. If you have an oral history program and they've used the OHM's oral history metadata synchronizer, those OHM's XML files can be imported directly into Aviary and displayed. That happens to be what's happening here in this case. or it could just be simple WebVTT that can be used, that standard can be used to create indexes. So they're sort of like transcripts if you're not familiar with indexes. They're time coded, they're linked to a section of the recording itself. And by clicking on the time code, you are taken to that section. And then there are titles of that segment. There's space for some sort of narrative summary. It's not about writing a full transcript, but there can be partial transcripts or a few words from it that can fit here. But then there's also the ability to create attach subjects or keywords to these sections, and those subjects or keywords can be taken from authoritative thesauri of either, like we have integrated already, the Library of Congress subject headings and the AFI ethnographic thesaurus that's already embedded, but an organization can create and import their own thesaurus to use for these subjects and keywords. And then you can see how we sort of highlight out the different subjects and keywords to make them stand out a bit. And then beyond that, one can link to outside URLs if there's other outside links that can help. In this case, this links out to the archival description for the music and lyrics of this song that's sung at this part, Mother of Men here and here. Other sorts of things that people do a lot of are link out to the Wikipedia entries for specific things. In this case, this bladder ball that is a historic game that has been played over a few centuries at Yale itself. And then there's also the capability to include GPS coordinates. In this case, this is happening in this spot at Yale University called the Porter Gate. And then what we do is we link out to Google Maps and drop those coordinates in, allowing the user to see that if that's something that you fill out. There can be multiple indexes if for some reason you want that. An example of that can sometimes be multiple language. Sometimes items are indexed in English and Spanish, and so then you can have multiple indexes in there. Or the indexes really could have different purposes. One could really just be a part 1, part 2, part 3, and then the other one could be getting into a description of subject and keyword or summary analysis, that sort of thing. So that's indexes. Then there are supplemental files. So supplemental files, as I said before, supplemental files are extra image files or PDF files that help in the description of the resource itself. And so you can have one to many. In this case, there's just one example here. But if it's a text PDF, that text PDF is fully searchable. You see in that New Haven search that we did, there were 5 hits. This is just a regular PDF reader, so it's not that we actually are showing the hit highlights in here. You do have to pull it up into full screen and show your hits inside there, but it does allow for the ability to have these sorts of supplemental files. This is a thing that some organizations also use for sort of historic oral histories, that they created edited transcripts without time codes, perhaps 30, 40, 50 years ago. And so they just have actually printed paper of these, and they can scan them to PDF and at least display this. It doesn't have all the power of a full transcript that's broken apart for the time code and allows you to jump around, but at least that text could be there, could be watched side by side during the viewing of the media file, and could be searched if you have searchable text in there. And so that's supplemental files. Okay, so I went through there and I talked through some of those. I do have a couple of slides that just sort of back some of that up, but just to show again on transcripts and captions, I'm not sure I really fully showed what the multiple languages. I had that Spanish one that I did, but here's an example from Johns Hopkins University Peabody Institute that they had done. It's a believe it's a commencement address. All right, the Peabody Institute is their music institute, and so they did this, and then they have these multiple languages of the transcripts that exist that move through for the speech by the president as they go through there. We talked about annotations. Here's another example on indexes. This one from the Nunn Center for Oral History at the University of Kentucky. Showing how the index looks in there and pointing out, maybe I didn't show, but on the timeline on the player, it's giving you these little handholds into where exactly these segments are, just to show, and it does give does help understand a little bit about how many of these segments exist in any particular resource or with each media file, just to see how that works and the like. And then we showed supplemental files, and then there was the example of that timeline of women at Yale in the supplemental files. Okay, so that's sort of the basics of the main parts of Aviary. One of the important features that I've talked about a bit already is that everything in Aviary is fully searchable, and that is searching within a single object, within a collection, or across all the objects in an organization. So I showed this a little bit, but here's running a slightly different search for the Bremen Museum. Here's a resource detail view for Anna Robbins, where you've done this search for Georgia and Atlanta, and it's finding that there's, in this case, 3 hits, 1 for Georgia, which is here at Georgia State, and 2 for Atlanta. So right now in Atlanta, and we know in Atlanta. So you can search inside a particular resource once you're in there. That might be if a user is really only interested in that specific item. But then there's also searching within a collection. So here is an example here. You can see this is, again, the Bremen Museum, and looking at the search interface in here, where I have done this same search, but I've done it with all the resources and filtered to a specific collection, the Esther and Herbert Taylor Oral History Collection. You can see that there are 348 different resources hits found in that collection. And then this other collection, which I didn't highlight, there are 240 hits found in this moment in time. But then once you get to your search results in there, you have cards for each of the resources that you found hits in, with a thumbnail of the primary media file for that resource. That resource's title here, Joseph Heyman, in this example, the organization that it came from, and the collection that it came from. In this case, we're only searching in one organization, and we've highlighted only one collection, so that doesn't have a whole lot of relevance in these results. But then it's then showing some date information and format information. These secondary results on what's displayed is all configurable by your aviary site on what you want to display if you don't really have dates or you don't think formats are very useful, and instead you want to see, I don't know, publisher or interviewee or place or whatever might be the thing that is applicable to you, that can be figured to display inside the search results. But by default, date and format are going to show along with the title. And then when you do a search, we then give you these search results showing you a bit about where we're finding those hits. So it's an aggregate. Since we did this, and we've got this Atlanta and Georgia, but then we're showing you how they're separately found. And so in Joseph Heyman, there's 11 hits found in the resource description. One of those is in the subject. Then in the index, the title of the index is all about Joseph Heyman, so there's a bunch of hits there. Then inside the text of the index itself, there are a number of hits with Atlanta in there, and the transcript has Atlanta 100, there's 130 hits in there, and in the annotations of the transcripts, there's 270. So there's a lot of hits on Atlanta, and then it shows the same thing from Georgia. And then based on the relevancy ranking, these are bigger numbers here up at the top and smaller numbers as you go down. I'll just show quickly that you have the ability to display these search results in a couple of different ways. If sort of image gallery search is sort of more important than seeing more of the text, you can show those things. And then you have the ability to do advanced searching or set it back to more simple searching. And if a user registers with Aviary, they have the ability to actually save advanced searches into their book bag for use later. So in addition to a collection search, you can also do those same searches all across in an organization. Here I took away those collections, but I can also go to the main Aviary. I can go outside of that site itself, and I can do I think it was Atlanta and Georgia was the search that I was doing there, and I can actually search across all Aviary organizations that are making metadata available to whatever user I am. And in this case, I am an unregistered unknown user, so this is available to the public. I could register as a user that has permissions to that organization, or I don't want to log myself in because I have admin rights, and so I can see everything. But in here, then you can see the number of hits that then we're showing on Atlanta and the number of different things in these different organizations. That can be filtered either by organization or any number of different facets over here at the left. And so the permissions controls exactly what it is the person sees in those search results. So talking about permissions, I know there's a lot of lines and boxes here, but Aviary has granular levels of access. I won't spend too much time in here, but the idea is that every different part of Aviary can be opened or restricted depending on need. You can restrict an entire collection, and then if you do, everything is restricted inside of it. You could restrict any single resource or all resources and only show the metadata, or don't show that anything exists, or show everything that exists, Or if you open a resource, you could restrict any of the media files. Say, in this example that I'm showing here, here is a resource that is open and its description is open, and some of the media files are publicly available while others are not publicly available. You can make those distinctions. And if the person goes to the restricted item, they get this content locked message and request access. And there's a, if you want to make that available, to allow people to request permission, and then there's a whole workflow to help you to manage requests for access depending upon what restrictions you actually have in any particular case. Those restrictions can also be applied to the indexes, the transcripts, the supplemental files. Here's just showing a picture here that the resource is discoverable, the media files are not open, and the transcripts are not open. And so in this case, this request for access is displayed. Okay, so another important feature of Aviary is that Aviary can act as a part of your larger audiovisual, descriptive, and systems environment, depending upon what it is that you have. And there's a number of different ways and different kinds of third-party systems that Aviary integrates with. Some of them out of the box that they are automatically work, and some of them, because they're very specific, require custom integration work so that you can set up so that Aviary understands exactly how your things work. There's a number of things on here. The various different sort of AV access systems that you may already be using, like YouTube, Vimeo, Kaltura, or Brightcove. We integrate with those and work with them to help with the different metadata and skinning those together, or working on migrating from one or the other. Some of the big ones are SAML, for if your organization has an authentication system already setting up for your institution. Institutional login can be integrated with Aviary through SAML 2.0. For archivists in the group, you may be describing your material in archive space, and there is an integration possible in archive space. And we've got about a dozen organizations that have set up that archive space integration. The idea mostly with those organizations is they don't want to actually type any resource description into Aviary at all. They want to do that in archive space, and they just want to synchronize in an automated way. And so that has been set up with that. I will talk a little bit about that. There's also, I'll also highlight Preservica integration. Some of you may actually use Preservica for your preservation system, for your digital preservation system for records. And there's, I'll also talk a little bit briefly about integration with OHMS, the oral history metadata synchronizer, if any of you are doing oral history projects and maybe have worked with OHMS at all in the past. So, these integrations are a little bit harder to show live. Some of them depend on showing a back-end staff system that I can't do too much. But that archive space integration, I can show public examples here. So here's an example from Johns Hopkins again, where they're using archive space for their archival descriptive system, and they are using the archive space PUI here. And you can see this is just their normal archive space, and then this is an embedded Aviary, a link to an Aviary object with the thumbnail used for Aviary here, and the title that's used here, and then a link to Aviary itself. unfortunately, I picked an example that Peabody isn't making publicly accessible, so I can't show it to you, but then that just opens into the record for the user itself. That is all created in an automated way. The synchronization happens by, I don't know if I didn't show this. If I go to, since I'm not logged in, I can't show, but basically you're just providing one-to-many archive space archival object IDs after we set up whatever the mapping is between the way that you're using archive space and the way you want that to map to Aviary. Then that's an automatic process of creating all that metadata directly. So that's really just the metadata, but then it depends a little bit on whether in archive space, if you're pointing to digital objects where the things are stored in a way that can be accessed. That might be one, the archive space Preservica integration, if you're talking about Preservica. So in this case, at Johns Hopkins, they were using both archive space and Preservica. So they gave us the archival object for this object. Then Aviary went, found all of this description and pulled it into Aviary, created the resource. Then it went and it found links to Preservica that it followed into Johns Hopkins Preservica, and it found the media files, in this case, just one media file. And then it created that in Aviary, and there was a transcript that went along with it, and we pulled that in as a transcript. And then depending upon your use, if you've got supplemental files or indexes that are in Preservica, or some people have links from archive space to Internet Archive or some sort of open storage system in some way that we can gain access to, all that can be built out in an automated way directly with the archive space and Preservica integrations. There's also Preservica integrations that can be directly from Preservica. So there are some cases where you're storing material AV and Preservica and you don't really have any in-depth description and an archival description or a catalog description. And so you can be synchronizing directly with Preservica. There's not a lot to show here on this, so I just show a little bit about what this looks like on the back end and filling that out. And then sort of another integration is with the OHM's oral history metadata synchronizer. So right now, currently, you're able to import and display OHM's records directly in Aviary through a special import. And if you do that and the record has an index and a transcript, that will automatically be created in Aviary. And if it's pointing correctly to the AV, it will automatically create the media file. Here's a none-center example that's showing that. But then even more integration is happening now that we're working on and finalizing in the next 3 months or so. We're actually OHM's itself, if you're familiar with it, is being completely built into Aviary, and will be going away as a separate object. It will be a part of Aviary, and so I'm just showing that this is on our development system. It does not exist in production yet, and it's still in development. That the free OHM's will be available to everyone right directly inside Aviary, and then you will have the whole current OHM's interview manager and access to all its metadata and its indexing module and its transcription and sync capability, all right inside of OHM's. Oops. And then one last integration to talk about that we've just started to work on a little bit lately for one customer is, I know that some state historical organizations have Content DM. Content DM, we have worked out an integration between Aviary and Content DM so that you can, right now, Content DM can play audio files, for example, but it doesn't have any way of linking or displaying the transcripts or other supplementary metadata beside it in an integrated way, the way that Aviary does. And so we set up an integration that allows, one to work through a regular content and DM instance. This is just some fake demo that I created here that has content DM records in a site that I haven't really styled very much except to make it purple. But then you come to an example, and then it's embedding the full experience of Aviary inside of that, and replacing the look and feel for what happens with a normal content DM page with the Aviary page inside of there, but still allows you to still be working. It still has all the parts of content DM if you still need to work on that. Maybe it's your image repository and you want them to work together. And there are more in development all the time, but those are some key integrations. Okay, I'm getting near the end of my time. I don't want to spend too much time here, but I wanted to thank you all for taking some time to hear a little bit about Aviary. I think there might be a few minutes for questions. I didn't see any in the chat, but maybe I'm not seeing those.
I didn't see any questions in chat, but now's a great time if you have some questions for Kevin. Go ahead and unmute and you can ask them, or if you'd rather just type them in chat, you can still do that. Kevin, it's exciting to see what some of the new integrations are going to be as well. It gives more versatility and more options for people. So I know you didn't really talk about it, but how easy is it on the back end to do some of this stuff?
It's assumed that the users of Aviary are not IT staff.
Okay.
We have very few IT staff that participate in Aviary work, and that's usually only at very large organizations that want to do very significant styling of pages, or that control the budgets, and so they're involved. Other than that, it's usually archivists or librarians or historians that are doing all of the work inside Aviary, and that's basically everything. Everything is a pretty simple GUI that works through there, and we have a chat and support service that just allows people to ask questions as they work along. It usually is pretty straightforward to do most things inside Aviary. Okay,
well, thank you for that. It looks like, of course, we're fortunate enough. Aviary has provided, AVP has provided Aviary for our COSA recordings. So actually, if you go searching for some of our previous webinars on YouTube, etc., you get the benefit of some of the Aviary things as you look through them. And Becky and I probably haven't done as much as we need to kind of keep update and take advantage of all the things, but the basics are there. So that's kind of nice to know. So if you're going to look through our own webinars, you could actually kind of see how Aviary works. So great.
And I assume you're going to be storing this recording in that COSA Aviary, right?
We are. So
if you do that, I can add index, transcript, and supplemental files to that resource, just as a way of inside the recording itself to show how some of those things work on the COSA site itself, so people don't need to delve into other organizations if they don't want to.
Excellent. I think that'll be really great. So thank you, Kevin. If you want to stop sharing, I'll start sharing my screen again. Okay, so I'm going to share mine. Let's see. Share. And let's go down to here. Current slide. Okay, so we've had our demonstration. Anybody have any questions? Here's a great chance to ask Kevin. If not, he's a resource available to us too. So if you do, we do have something in chat. Let's see what we've got here. Alan asks, is there any integration with Drupal web-based systems such as Islandora or Islandora? I'm not sure that's pronounced. Kevin?
Thanks, Alan. There has not yet been an integration that has been set up with Islandora. There have been migration discussions, but not actual integrations. It just hasn't come up. It doesn't mean that it couldn't happen, but just has not yet.
Excellent question. Okay. Anybody else have anything, any comments, any questions for Kevin? Well, Kevin, we thank you so much for being a presenter today. And just a couple quick announcements here. If you enjoyed today's webinar, the last Thursday of every month is our COSA member webinar activities. And next month, we're going to have a presentation by an organization called enslaved.org to learn a little bit more about what they're doing. And then in October will be our State Archives Showcase. We're going to look at New York and New Jersey as their archives, what they're doing. So that's something you want to take a look at. We also have SERI webinars coming up. They will have one for Electronic Records Day called Access Denied. So again, go to our COSA website and you can log on for all of those. As it's easy to stay in touch with COSA, lots of different ways, the website, the resource center, our Facebook page, etc. Come by, say hello. We'd love to hear from you. And finally, when you leave today, there should probably be a link to a little evaluation. It helps us as we prepare future shop talks and future webinars. So I hope you'll take advantage and say something about that. So with that, if there are no more questions, I'd like to thank everyone for participating today. Kevin, thank you for sharing Aviary with us. And hopefully that's got some people starting to think about exciting ways that maybe that's something that would work in their archives. So thank you everyone for joining us. And I hope we'll see you at the next Shop Talk and or at the next member webinar. Take care and have a great day. Have a good one. Bye, everyone.